Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. You know, we love these deep dives, and today is no exception. We're going on a pilgrimage of knowledge, exploring the Hajj as described in the Sunan al Tirmidhi, Volume 2.
That's a really great way to put it. The Sunan al Tirmidhi, for anyone who might be new to the show, is a collection of hadith, which are the sayings and practices of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. This volume covers a ton of topics, but today we're zeroed in on the Hajj.
Right, and I think it's important to lay that groundwork first. Like, what is the Hajj, and why is it such a central part of the Islamic faith?
So, the Hajj is the fifth pillar of Islam. It's a pilgrimage to Mecca in Saudi Arabia that every Muslim who's able-bodied and can afford it has to go on once in their life. It's really symbolic, tracing back to the Prophet Abraham and his family and their submission to God.
I mean, just imagine millions of Muslims from all over the world, from every background, all coming together in Mecca, all in the same simple white clothes, all doing these same rituals. It's just such a powerful image of unity and equality.
Absolutely. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi really brings this out by outlining the different ways that Hajj can be performed. You have tamatus, ifrad, and qiran. They each have slightly different rituals, but they all fulfill that obligation of Hajj.
So let's break those down a little bit. What are the differences between those types?
Sure. So in tamatus, you do Umrah first. Umrah is like a mini pilgrimage, and then you enter Ifam for Hajj, putting on simple clothes and getting into a state of spiritual purity. And then there's Ifrad, where you enter Ihram just for Hajj without doing Umrah first. And lastly, you have Qiran, which is where you do both Umrah and Hajj together at the same time.
It's interesting that there's even all this nuance just in how you can perform Hajj. Does the Sunan al Tirmidhi have a preference for any of them?
Yeah, it does. It mentions that scholars preferred tamatus because they thought it was a better way to fulfill the obligation of sacrifice, which is a key part of Hajj.
Makes sense. Now, I know that Hajj has a lot of symbolism and ritualistic actions. Can you tell us more about those?
Definitely. One of the most well-known is the talbiyah, which is an invocation pilgrims say throughout Hajj. The Sunan al Tirmidhi actually gives us the full Arabic for it, and it also has this beautiful hadith about it.
Oh, I'd love to hear about that. That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it really is. So the hadith says that when a pilgrim is reciting the talbiyah, everything around them, like the rocks and trees, even the earth itself, is joining in and responding to God's call. It creates this amazing picture of how everything is connected and how even inanimate objects take part in this journey.
That's so beautiful. It makes you realize that during Hajj, you're not just on a personal journey, but part of something way bigger. It's almost cosmic.
You got it. And that awe and connection just intensifies as the pilgrim gets closer to Mecca and sees the Kaaba for the first time. Imagine traveling from so far away and finally seeing this ancient structure, a center of prayer for centuries.
I can only imagine how emotional that must be. Does the Sunan al Tirmidhi talk about what the Prophet Muhammad did when he first saw the Kaaba?
It does. It describes how he touched the black stone, which is that revered relic set in the corner of the Kaaba. Then he did tawaf, which is circling the Kaaba 7 times, and prayed at the Maqam Ibrahim, which is the station of Abraham near the Kaaba.
It's amazing how those actions, done by millions for centuries, connect pilgrims to the very beginning of Islam. This ongoing chain of faith linking each pilgrim to the prophets who came before.
Exactly. And speaking of connecting to the origins of Islam, the day of Arafat is super important during Hajj. It's like the peak of the pilgrimage.
I know standing at Arafat is one of the most important rituals of Hajj. Why is that?
So Arafat is this plain about 15 miles from Mecca. On the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, which is the last month of the Islamic lunar calendar, pilgrims go there from noon to sunset. They stand there asking God for forgiveness. It's believed that at that moment they are as close to God as they'll ever be and all their sins are forgiven.
It sounds like a deeply moving spiritual experience. Does the Sunan al Tirmidhi say anything about how important Arafat is?
It does. It says that Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, Hajj is Arafat. This just shows you how central Arafat is to the whole Hajj. It's a day for serious reflection, repentance, and renewal.
It's like the whole point of Hajj boiled down into one day.
That's a good way to put it. The day of Arafat is all about letting go of worldly things and focusing on your relationship with God, remembering that we depend completely on God's mercy.
So after that powerful experience at Arafat, what happens next?
Well, after sunset on the day of Arafat, pilgrims go to Muzdalifah. It's an open plain between Arafat and Mina. They stay there for the night, praying and gathering pebbles for the next ritual, which is the stoning of the Jamarat.
Ah, yes, the stoning of the Jamarat. I've heard of it, but what does it symbolize?
So the Jamarat are 3 pillars that represent Satan. The act of stoning them is about rejecting temptation and evil. It's like a reenactment of when Prophet Abraham rejected Satan's attempts to stop him from sacrificing his son when God told him to.
Wow. So it's not just throwing rocks at some pillars. It's about actively deciding to resist negativity and recommit to God.
That's it. The Sunan al Tirmidhi really gets into the details about the order in which you should stone the pillars. And it really emphasizes doing it after the sun has passed its highest point. It even has a hadith telling pilgrims to stone with dignity, avoiding pushing and shoving, which is really important with such huge crowds.
That's a good reminder. It's easy to get caught up in the crowd, but even then, you have to stay composed and respect others. That's what the Sunan al Tirmidhi is saying.
Absolutely. Speaking of respect, the next ritual is the animal sacrifice, which is a big act of submission and devotion.
The sacrifice, yeah. I've always wondered about the meaning behind it. It seems so powerful.
It really is. It's called Qurbani, and it commemorates Prophet Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son because God asked him to. It reminds us of the sacrifices we make for our faith, and it symbolizes giving up our ego and desires to God's will.
It's interesting how this goes back to the story of Prophet Abraham and how strong his faith was. It just adds another layer of meaning to the Hashi.
Exactly. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi makes it clear that sharing the meat from the sacrifice with poor people is a key part of the ritual. It shows the community aspect of this act and how important compassion and social responsibility are, especially during Hajj.
So it's not just a personal thing, but something that helps the whole community. It's nice how even in our worship, we should think of those less fortunate.
Exactly. The Sunan al Tirmidhi even says that up to 7 people can share in the sacrifice of a cow or camel, which makes it possible for those who can't afford it to take part. This shows how inclusive Islam is and how it emphasizes supporting each other.
So we see how the Sunan al Tirmidhi addresses both the spiritual and practical sides of the rituals, making sure they're accessible to everyone.
Yeah. And speaking of accessibility, it also talks about what happens after the sacrifice, the rituals that mark the end of Ihram and coming back to normal life.
I know this is where they take off those Ihram clothes, right? Seems pretty symbolic.
It is. The Sunan al Tirmidhi explains that the end of Ihram is marked by shaving or trimming the hair, and for men, changing out of those Ihram garments. It's a physical sign of the inner transformation that you hopefully went through during Hajj.
And what about women? Are there any special rules for them?
Yes. The text says that women are allowed to just trim their hair instead of shaving it all off. It also says that they can use perfume after Ihram ends, even before they do the farewell tawaf, which is the last time they circle the Kaaba.
It's really interesting how these little details show how Islam is sensitive to women's experiences in these rituals. Shows there's flexibility within the rules.
Exactly. The Sunan al Tirmidhi gives clear guidelines, but also recognizes that people have different situations and needs. It reminds us that Islam is compassionate and understanding.
We've already covered so much, but there's still a lot more to talk about in the Sunan al Tirmidhi's view of Hajj.
Yeah.
We'll have to continue where we left off in our next episode.
I agree. There's so much more to unpack about the symbolism, the spiritual lessons, and the guidance the Sunan al Tirmidhi offers for this life-changing journey.
So to all our listeners, stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive into the Sunan al Tirmidhi's exploration of Hajj. We'll be back soon to continue this journey.
Looking forward to it. Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. You know, one thing I noticed in the Sunan al Tirmidhi about the end of Ihram is how even small details, like women trimming their hair instead of shaving it, show a deeper kind of sensitivity in Islamic law.
It's true. It really does challenge that rigid view some people have of religious law. It shows how much emphasis is placed on practicality and individual needs.
Exactly. And you see that in other parts of Hajj, too. Like the thing about raising your hands when you first see the Kaaba. There's a whole section about it in the Sunan al Tirmidhi, and it's actually pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Some people raise their hands like in prayer and others don't. What does the Sunan al Tirmidhi say about it?
Well, it talks about different opinions from different scholars. Shows how diverse Islamic thinking is. Some say raising your hands is fine as a way of showing awe and praying to God, while others think it's not really a prescribed practice.
So it's not a clear-cut thing, which is interesting in itself. Shows how there can be different interpretations and personal understanding within Islamic law.
Exactly. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi encourages us to think about these different views and why they exist. It's not about blindly following one opinion, but getting a deeper understanding of Islamic tradition.
It's about informed faith, not blind faith.
Exactly. Changing gears a bit, I'm curious about the practical side of Hajj. The Sunan al Tirmidhi is big on details. Does it say anything about things like dealing with crowds, hygiene, or doing rituals when it's tough?
That's a good point. I imagine all that can be pretty hard during Hajj, with so many people and the conditions being what they are.
For sure. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi doesn't shy away from that stuff. For example, it says it's okay to shorten your prayers when you're traveling, which is a big help for pilgrims who are always on the move. It also talks about what to do if you accidentally break your fast during Ramadan while on Hajj. It tells you how to make up for it.
So it's not just a theoretical book, but a practical guide for dealing with the real stuff that happens on this pilgrimage.
Exactly. It even gets into some surprising topics, like the rules about spitting in the mosque.
Spitting in the mosque. That sounds a bit unsanitary, to say the least.
I know, right? Sounds a bit strange. But the Sunan al-Tirmidhi has specific guidelines about when and where you're allowed to spit during prayer. It always emphasizes respecting the mosque as a holy place.
Oh, that makes more sense.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that balance between practicality and reverence, even in small things.
Exactly. That attention to detail shows up in other parts of Hajj, too, like whether you can walk in front of someone praying at the Kaaba if you have to, or the suggestion to use pebbles from Muzdalifa for the stoning ritual. These might seem like small things, but they show how comprehensive Islamic guidance is.
It's really interesting how the Sunan al Tirmidhi connects the spiritual with the practical. The big stories of faith with everyday human stuff.
Yeah, and it's that mix that makes it so valuable for Muslims of all times. It's not just a history book, but a living guide for how to deal with the complexities of faith and life.
Speaking of guidance, one thing I've always found fascinating about Hajj is that feeling of transformation that a lot of pilgrims talk about. Does the Sunan al Tirmidhi address that?
Well, it doesn't really go into personal stories about transformation, but it does talk about the huge spiritual benefits of doing Hajj. For instance, it mentions that if you do Hajj sincerely and with devotion, it can erase your past sins and make you spiritually pure.
So it's not just about going through the rituals, but about changing your perspective inside and connecting more deeply with God.
Absolutely. And that connection is strengthened by how communal Hajj is. Millions of Muslims from all different walks of life coming together, all with the same goal, it really makes the bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood stronger. Reminds you that Islam is all about unity, compassion, and sharing responsibility.
That makes me think of something else I was wondering about.
Yeah.
Does the Sunan al Tirmidhi say anything about performing Hajj on behalf of someone else? I know some Muslims do that for elderly parents or relatives who have passed away.
It does, actually. It explains that it's okay to perform Hajj for someone who can't do it themselves, maybe because of health or money problems. It even says how to do it properly and stresses that it's important to honor the wishes of the person you're doing Hajj for.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
It really makes Hajj accessible to more people and recognizes that everyone should have the chance to fulfill their spiritual goals.
Right. It's about understanding how our lives are connected and how those bonds go beyond our physical existence.
We've talked about the rituals and the practicalities, but let's go a little deeper into the spiritual side. What does the Sunan al Tirmidhi say about Ihram, that state of being that pilgrims enter before Hajj?
Ihram, that's a crucial part of Hajj. It symbolizes letting go of worldly things and putting all your focus on God. The Sunan al Tirmidhi goes into a lot of detail about what you can't do when you're in Ihram. It's all about creating spiritual focus and detachment.
It's like creating a spiritual bubble where pilgrims can forget about their everyday lives and really focus on the rituals of Hajj.
Exactly. You can't hunt, cut your hair or nails, wear perfume, have sex, or even argue or fight.
Hmm.
It's all about being peaceful, humble, and completely surrendering to God.
It's like intentionally stripping away all the extra stuff to focus on what really matters.
That's it. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi even talks about what happens if you accidentally break one of these rules and how you can atone for it.
So it recognizes that we're human and we make mistakes,
Mhm.
even in a sacred space like Hajj.
Exactly. And speaking of human experiences, the Sunan al Tirmidhi also talks about dealing with lice while in Ihram.
Lice? Yikes, that doesn't sound like a fun thing to have during Hajj.
No, definitely not. But the text gives you practical advice. It says it's okay to shave your head if you have lice.
A good reminder that even on a spiritual journey, you still have to deal with everyday problems. And there's guidance to help you through it.
Right, and it also shows how important cleanliness is in Islam, even during a tough journey.
But it's not just about physical cleanliness, right? I'm guessing the Sunan al Tirmidhi also talks about spiritual purity.
Absolutely. It emphasizes that real piety is more than just the rituals. It's about cleaning your heart and mind along with your body. Real devotion means having virtues like humility, compassion, and being genuine.
It's about aligning what you do with what you believe, making your actions match your intentions.
Precisely. The Sunan al Tirmidhi is clear that Hajj is not just a physical trip, but a deep spiritual change. It's a chance to get rid of bad habits, purify your soul, and come back home a better person, closer to God.
It's like a spiritual reset button.
That's a good way to put it. Hajj is a chance to break away from the things that distract you in the material world and focus on what's truly important. Your relationship with God, your purpose in life, and living a life of virtue and service.
And that transformation, like we talked about, it doesn't stop with the pilgrim. It affects the whole community.
Right. The Sunan al Tirmidhi says that people who come back from Hajj are often seen as role models and guides. Their experience makes the lives of those around them better.
Like they bring a piece of that sacred journey back with them,
Mm.
sharing the blessings with their family and community.
Exactly. That feeling of shared experience, of everyone's spirit being lifted together, shows how unifying Hajj is. It brings people from all walks of life together, gets rid of social and cultural barriers, and reminds us that we're all human and we all need God's guidance.
It reminds us that in God's eyes, we're all equal, no matter where you come from, your status, or how much you own.
Absolutely. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi emphasizes that equality by saying it's important to treat every pilgrim with respect and kindness, no matter where they come from, their background, or their social standing.
So it's not just about personal cleansing, but about creating unity and brotherhood in the Muslim community.
Exactly. Hajj is like a miniature version of the ideal Islamic society, where everyone gets along peacefully and is united by their faith and their desire to serve God.
As we talk about all this, I'm really struck by how the Sunan al-Tirmidhi acknowledges that even the most important people in Islamic history were still human. It doesn't shy away from showing their struggles and weaknesses.
Oh, I love those stories. They make those figures feel more relatable, more real.
Right, like the story about how Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, had lice during his last Hajj.
Wait, he had lice?
He did. The Sunan al-Tirmidhi says he had the option to shave his head, and he did. It shows that even the Prophet faced normal human problems.
It's humbling. It reminds you that faith isn't about being perfect, but about trying to be good and looking for guidance even when you least expect it. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi gives you that guidance. It's full of knowledge, insights, and practical advice for dealing with the complexities of faith and life, both during Hajj and in your everyday life.
It shows how rich and deep Islamic tradition is. It's a valuable tool for Muslims who want to understand and practice their faith better.
You know, speaking of understanding our faith, there's one last thing I want to say about the Sunan al Tirmidhi and its view of Hajj. It reminds us that Hajj is not just about following rules. It's about developing a heart and mind that are in tune with the spirit of Islam.
So it's about living with compassion, humility, and submission to God, not just going through the motions.
Exactly. The text says that the rituals of Hajj are only meaningful if you do them with the right intentions and spiritual state.
The powerful message. It makes us think about why we do what we do and to
Really?
be sincere in everything we do.
It is, and the Sunan al Tirmidhi talks about how to cultivate that sincerity, approaching Hajj with humility, focusing on pleasing God, and letting go of our own desires.
So it's not just what you do, but why you do it.
You got it. And that focus on intention and sincerity goes back to the transformative power of Hajj. The Sunan al Tirmidhi says that Hajj isn't just a physical journey, it's a spiritual journey. It's about shedding bad habits, purifying the soul, and coming home renewed and closer to God.
It's like hitting the reset button on your spiritual life.
Exactly. Hajj is a chance to break free from the distractions and attachments of the material world and focus on what truly matters. Your relationship with God, your purpose in life, and your commitment to living a life of virtue and service.
And that transformation, as we've talked about, doesn't just benefit the individual pilgrim. It has ripple effects throughout the community.
Absolutely. The Sunan al Tirmidhi points out how pilgrims who return from Hajj often become sources of inspiration and guidance for others, enriching the lives of those around them.
It's like they bring a piece of that sacred journey back with them, sharing its blessings with their families and communities.
Exactly. And that sense of shared experience of collective spiritual upliftment is a testament to the unifying power of Hajj. It brings people together from all walks of life, erasing social and cultural barriers and reminding us of our shared humanity and our common need for God's guidance.
It's a powerful reminder that in the eyes of God, we are all equal, regardless of our background status or worldly possessions.
Absolutely. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi reinforces this message of equality by emphasizing the importance of treating all pilgrims with respect and compassion, regardless of their origin, ethnicity, or social standing.
So it's not just about personal purification. It's about fostering a sense of unity and brotherhood within the Muslim community.
Exactly. Hajj is a microcosm of the ideal Islamic society where people from all walks of life come together in peace and harmony, united by their shared faith and their commitment to serving God.
It really feels like we've just scratched the surface of this topic. There's still so much more to explore within the Sunan al Tirmidhi's account of the Hajj.
Mhm.
I guess we'll have to pick up where we left off in our next episode.
I agree. There's so much more to uncover about the symbolism, the spiritual lessons, and the practical advice that the Sunan al Tirmidhi offers for this life-changing journey.
For our listeners, don't miss part 3 of our deep dive into the Sunan al Tirmidhi's exploration of the Hajj. We'll be back soon to continue this journey of discovery.
See you then! Welcome back to Echoes of Ihsan. As we wrap up our look at the Sunan al Tirmidhi and Hajj, I'm struck by how it can be both so specific and yet open to personal interpretation.
Yeah, it's a tough balance, right? Giving clear guidelines, but also letting people find their own understanding and grow spiritually.
Definitely. And I think the Sunan al Tirmidhi strikes that balance perfectly. It gets into practical stuff like hygiene or how to do the rituals when it's crowded, but it always links that back to the deeper meaning of Hajj.
It's a reminder that even simple actions can become meaningful during Hajj if you have the right intention.
Exactly. And that brings up intention, which I've been thinking about. We said how important interchange is during Hajj, but how does the Sunan al Tirmidhi emphasize being sincere in what you do?
That's a big one. The Sunan al Tirmidhi is very clear that just going through the motions isn't enough.
Yeah.
For Hajj to be real, you have to have a sincere heart, truly want to be closer to God, and be ready to let go of ego and those worldly things that hold you back.
So making sure your actions match up with what's in your heart.
Right. The text says that the rituals are like a mirror of what's inside. If your heart isn't in it, if you're not truly looking for forgiveness and purity and that deeper connection with God, the rituals themselves don't mean much.
It's a reminder to check your intentions, not just in Hajj, but in everything you do.
Exactly. And the Sunan al Tirmidhi gives us advice on how to develop that sincerity, how to approach Hajj with humility, wanting to please God and letting go of your own wants.
So it comes down to not just what you do, but why you do it.
Exactly. And that focus on intention and sincerity links back to the power of change that Hajj brings. The Sunan al Tirmidhi emphasizes that Hajj isn't a vacation, it's a spiritual journey, a chance to get rid of bad habits, purify your soul, and come back a new person closer to God.
It's like hitting reset on your spiritual life.
Right. Hajj is an opportunity to step away from all the distractions of the world and focus on what truly matters, your relationship with God, your purpose, and living a life of virtue and service.
And as we've talked about, that change doesn't just stay with the person who went on Hajj. It goes out into the community.
Absolutely. The Sunan al Tirmidhi points out how people coming back from Hajj become sources of inspiration and guidance for others. They make life better for everyone around them.
It's like they bring back a part of that sacred experience, sharing those blessings with their family and community.
Absolutely. And that sense of shared experience of everyone being lifted up spiritually really shows how unifying Hajj is. It breaks down those social and cultural walls, reminding us that we're all human and we all need God's guidance.
It's powerful. Reminds us that in God's eyes, we're all equal. It doesn't matter where we come from, what our status is, or what we have materially.
And the Sunan al Tirmidhi really pushes that equality by stressing how important it is to treat all pilgrims with respect and compassion, no matter their background, ethnicity, or social standing.
It's not just about personal purification, it's about building unity and brotherhood in the Muslim community.
Exactly. Hajj is a small-scale model of what Islamic society should be, where everyone gets along, united by their faith and their desire to serve God.
And you know what strikes me? The Sunan al Tirmidhi doesn't pretend that those key figures in Islamic history were perfect. It tells stories that show their struggles and flaws.
I love those. Makes them feel more relatable, more human.
Right, like that story about Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, having lice during his last Hajj.
He did.
Yep. The Sunan al Tirmidhi says he could have shaved his head, and he did. It shows that even the Prophet had normal human problems.
It's a good reminder that faith isn't about never messing up. It's about trying to be good and asking for guidance, even in unexpected situations.
And the Sunan al Tirmidhi gives us that guidance. So much knowledge and insight, practical advice for navigating faith and life during Hajj and beyond.
It shows how rich Islamic tradition is. It's a valuable tool for Muslims who want to really understand and live their faith.
It really is. One last thing I want to highlight about the Sunan al Tirmidhi's take on Hajj. It reminds us that this journey isn't just about ticking off a checklist of rules. It's about developing a heart and mind that aligns with the true spirit of Islam.
Living with compassion, humility, and submitting to God. not just going through the motions.
Exactly. The text emphasizes that those outward rituals only hold the meaning we put into them with our intentions and spiritual state.
A powerful message that makes us think about why we do things, and to be sincere in all aspects of our lives.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We've spent this deep dive exploring the rituals, the symbolism, the transformative power of Hajj, all is laid out in the Sunan al Tirmidhi.
It's been an incredible journey, exploring the intricacies of Hajj, the profound symbolism, and the potential for transformation, all through the lens of the Sunan al Tirmidhi.
Absolutely. But in the end, it's up to each of us to take these teachings, relate them to our own lives, and find ways to live out the spirit of Hajj in our daily actions.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you're inspired to learn even more about this incredible journey and what it means for you.
And to all our listeners, may your own spiritual journeys be full of meaning, purpose, and God's blessings.